started. I'm sorry we were just a few minutes late. We were delayed with technology with that very nifty orange circle going on over there, where the event today is being live streamed. So we will now get started. And good evening. So my name is Jenny Kwan. I'm the Member of Parliament for Vancouver East. And of course, I'm with my good colleague and friend, MP Don Davies, hosting this evening's town hall on Save Our Environment. And before we begin to get to the panelists, I'd like to first do a land acknowledgement and to say thank you to the First Peoples, the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Slave Peoples for allowing us to be on their unceded Coast Salish territories. And to start off our event in a good way today, I'm very blessed and lucky to have Cecilia Point to join us today to give us our blessings. Cecilia, please.
Asiem Nasieya, Anta Cecilia Point, Literatua Pomasquiam, Amita Papilam. I'll ask our ancestors to make us Natsamat tonight, all one. I like to give people reminders of what the land acknowledgement and the territorial welcome is for. And it's to give you a sense of place where you are. My great-grandfather was a young man at the turn of the century, at 1900. So I always tell people he watched Vancouver drop on him like a building. He walked all around this place when there were still thousands of streams and lots of trees and abundance of fish. And even when I was young, I could catch herring with my bare hands in the Fraser River there. So my seatmate and I were just talking about the next generation, grandkids and little ones. And I notice a lot of you in this room are my age. And now we're moving into the elder stage. So we want the next 7 generations to have the beautiful existence that we had, subsistence on these lands. Before contact, the West Coast was the most populated place on this continent because of the abundance here. So I want you to think about that. And it's a great opportunity to speak to our politicians and give them our wish lists. We want to look after our homelands. We want the salmon to come back. I'm very happy that a lot of the fish farms are going away. We don't want to be arrested for protecting our own lands. You know, I listen to the women up there who have lived off those lands themselves and their families. Fresh, clean water there. Raise my hands to everybody who's helping with that fight. And I'm really interested to hear our doctor this evening. Grand Chief and I were up in the tar sands a few years ago, and the Fort Chip people told us of all the medical issues they had up there, little clusters of bile duct cancer and poison animals. That's not where we want to go. We want our governments, even those on the left, to stop, with the push for resource development and raping the land and Mother Earth. We know it's important for people to have good jobs, but we were able to subsist off these lands without destroying it and poisoning ourselves. So I really want to raise my hands to this learned panel here. Grand Chief, honor you for all the great work that you've done in my homelands. And I just want to leave you with this. When visitors come here, we always go out and ask them, are you coming here in a good way to do good things? So I want to acknowledge Jenny and Don for doing their best, always talking to their people, asking them how they can help. Before we were considered garbage and our belongings considered garbage just last week and thrown in the garbage. That's not a good way. That's not a good way to be here. You know, we all lived together in the longhouse, looked after each other, and no one was homeless, and everyone had abundance of food, fresh berries, beautiful climate, fresh fish and game. So I just want you to think about that. I want you to think about how we can get back to that and protect what little we have left, Osia. So I'm going to leave you with the paddle song to open our evening.
Thank you very much, Cecilia, for those wise words and for the welcoming song. And as indicated, we must paddle together to do what is right, not for just this generation, for generations to come. And to begin, I'm just going to make some opening remarks, and then I'm going to invite Dawn to come up to also to say a few words, and then we'll begin with the panelists. And then afterwards, we're going to open up the floor for questions and comments back. We aim to end the event today at about 8:30-ish. We started a little late, and then so, but we'll aim to sort of end at a respectable hour so that people can get home for the evening. And we so much appreciate all of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join with us today. So, as indicated, we have a bit of a crisis before us. And to win the war on the climate crisis, Canada needs to invest in real climate solutions at the scale that is required with the urgency that is needed to match the crisis. Indigenous communities must be at the table. We are standing on their land. We're gathered on their land, and they must be at the table. And that they must also be leading the way to environmental protection and climate action. According to the UN, to limit warming to 1.5 degrees global emissions have to drop 7.6% every year. To save our planet, Canada must reduce its emissions by 60% by 2030 compared to 2005 levels. Addressing oil and gas emissions is critical if Canada is to reach its share of that target. Canadians should not be subsidizing the oil and gas industry as we are right now, and who, by the way, made some $147 billion in profits just this year alone. And those dollars should be redirected to the green tech sector to support communities in building climate resiliency, including increasing the Disaster Adaptation Fund, and to supporting workers in ensuring that Indigenous communities and leadership have the resources to build economically in their community. And just transition for workers must be real and meaningful. It can't just be words. And that's why we, the NDP, we've been wanting to see just transition legislation, a clean jobs secretariat, a training center for workers. These are some of the things that we've been pushing in the House of Commons. The NDP also wants to see the adoption of a clean jobs industrial strategy that echoes the calls from CanArc, Eco Justice, CLC, Unifor, and Blue Green Canada. Large-scale infrastructure projects such as the interprovincial electricity grid connection, massive transit expansion, and the acceleration of retrofits with a big focus on energy poverty and low and medium income households should be prioritized. Let's attach green and labor strings to projects and programs so that we can see real emission reductions. In Budget 2023, the NDP were able to force the Liberals to put a few things that are our priorities in this budget. $6.3 billion over 5 years for a clean electricity investment tax credit, with an addition of $19.4 billion to 2033. $10 billion towards clean power and $10 billion towards green infrastructure through the Canada Infrastructure Bank's existing fund. We're also able to force the government to invest $3 billion over 13 years to natural resources to support clean electricity projects, $4.5 billion over 5 years for a clean technology investment tax credit, with an additional $6.6 billion to 2035. $5.6 billion clean hydrogen investment tax credit with labor conditions, with an additional $12.1 billion to 2035. $500 million for the Strategic Innovation Fund to support development of clean tech, and up to $1.5 billion of existing SIF resources directed towards clean tech projects. $650 million over 10 years for protecting fresh water, and $151.9 million for protecting whales. These are just some of the items that my colleague, MP Laurel Collins, have been pushing as the environment critic in the House of Commons, enforcing the government to take some action. Is this enough? No, we don't think so. No more needs to be done, absolutely. One of the key priorities that we had wanted to see was, in fact, for the government to stop the oil and gas industry subsidies, and they haven't done that work. So the work continues, and meanwhile, as the climate crisis continues, we are seeing it in the environment all around us. You know, I just came back from out east, and in Quebec, they're experiencing an ice storm. You know, here in Vancouver, we experienced the heat dome. People die, and that is the reality. So action needs to be taken now, and we cannot wait. So I'm very delighted to join with my colleague, Don Davies, today to host this town hall, to invite experts to share their knowledge with us, and for us to engage in this dialogue so that we can bring back the message to the House of Commons as we continue on this important fight and this war on the climate crisis. Thank you all so very much, and with that, I'm going to invite Don to come up and say a word.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm Don Davies, Member of Parliament for Vancouver Kingsway, and again, I want to acknowledge that we gather on the unceded traditional territory of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam people by whose grace we live, work, and play. I want to thank Cecilia Point for, as always, an incredibly powerful and moving land acknowledgement. I think you said it all, and in a way that touched my heart, and I'm sure everybody else's here, so thank you. I want to thank all of you for coming here tonight. I think that this gathering here is, I think, a reflection of the importance that this issue has in our community. And I want to thank my colleague Jenny Kwan for co-hosting this. I'm very excited to host this important discussion and bring together and share with you a panel of very passionate and knowledgeable voices. I also look forward to hearing not only their perspectives on the environment, but also yours. When I say our environment, I think what we mean is our planet. And what we mean is the very basis of our lives and our existence. I actually Googled the word environment, and it says the natural world as a whole or in a particular geographical area, especially as affected by human activity. I thought that was an interesting gloss. And the second definition said the surroundings or conditions in which a person, animal, or plant lives or operates. That's our planet, it's where we live. Last election, I had the opportunity to knock on thousands of doors of our neighbors in the community that I'm privileged to represent, as I know Jenny did as well. And of the many issues facing our city, our province, our country, and our world, deep concern about the health of our environment was clearly top of mind. In fact, to me, after that election was over, it was very clear that the climate crisis and all that it threatens is the foundational issue of our times. This is not surprising, I don't think, because of the many, many issues in politics, very few are existential. And this issue represents an existential threat not only to humans, but to all species on our world. Now the bottom line, as Jenny pointed out, is that if we do not implement effective policies to halt the rise in temperature and keep it within 1.5 degrees of pre-industrial times, if we don't protect and enhance natural habitats and preserve full biodiversity, if we don't transform our economies into truly sustainable ones that are in harmony with our natural world, then we face catastrophic destruction on an unimaginable scale. And like Jenny, I don't think we're doing enough to achieve these. March was the 529th month in a row that it was hotter than the 20th century average. If you're younger than 44, and don't worry, I'm not going to ask you, but if you're younger than 44 years old, you have never experienced a cooler than average month. So that brings us to tonight. Jenny and I wanted to focus on this critical issue and hear a diversity of views about the environment that we live in. We've assembled an excellent panel of people who care passionately about this issue as well. Dr. Melissa Lem, Grand Chief Stewart Phillip, and Adele Liu, who I hope will share their unique perspectives, and I will introduce each of them as they speak in turn. And Jenny covered this, but before I do so, I just want to quickly run over the agenda. Each speaker will have about 10 minutes or so to provide us with their thoughts and presentations. And after each of them have spoken, we will open the floor to you to hear your thoughts and questions. To hear as many voices as possible, we will limit each audience member to about 1.5 minutes. That is a good amount of time we've found to develop your question or point, and if you have more to say, then maybe we can get you to a second round. Now, it's not that I don't trust each and every one of you to honor the time limit. But just in case the urge to wax eloquent is overpowering for you, we will ring a bell at the minute-and-a-half mark, at which point we will ask you to complete your thought, and hopefully this will trigger a Pavlovian response in the rest of you that will ensure a harmonious and disciplined meeting. So, thank you all so much for being here tonight. By the way, I think we'll probably go 8:45, I think, because we want to make sure that we have enough time for speakers and a good amount of time to hear from you. So our first speaker is Dr. Melissa Lem. Dr. Lem is a Vancouver family physician who also works in rural and northern communities within Canada. She's president of the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment and director of PARX, something prescription, Canada's national nature prescription program powered by the BC Parks Foundation. Dr. Lem will tell you exactly, she'll pronounce that for you. She's an internationally recognized leader in the field of nature and health. She's also engaged in advocacy and policy work on a broad range of other issues, from climate change and hydraulic fracturing to sustainable healthcare and low carbon transportation. Now, I could read for another 10 minutes. I'm not going to because we want to hear from her. But she's a widely published writer, and her work appears all over the place: CBC, Vancouver Sun, the Narwhal, the Montreal Gazette, and she's also a climate change panelist on CBC Radio's Early Edition, as well as in-house medical columnist for CBC TV in Vancouver. See, I'm saying more than I said I wouldn't, so I'm going to stop. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the mic over to Dr. Melissa Lem.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Don, for that warm welcome and all the meaningful words that have preceded what I'm going to say now. And so when I was thinking about what I would say in 10 minutes, because there are so many different things I could talk about, I thought I would speak to what I know. So of course, number one, health. And then number two, how we can come together as disparate communities. So I knew I would be speaking beside Grand Chief Stewart Phillip, beside Adele Liu from Nature Vancouver, beside politicians, beside community members. So I thought I would try to give you some inspiration also as to how we can come together to make a difference. So the World Health Organization has said many times that climate change is the greatest threat to human health of the 21st century. And we have seen this ourselves here in BC. So with the heat dome in 2021 that in the space of under 2 weeks killed over 600 people, the catastrophic flooding that followed that, the smoke season after smoke season that we now call smoke season, from unprecedented wildfires that we call unprecedented every single year, we are already seeing the effects of climate change on our health right here in BC. And as a physician, the question often comes up is why don't you stay in your lane? You know, why don't you just stay in your office, work in the hospital, take care of your patients? Why are you speaking about this issue? And the reason is because only 20 to 25% of our health status comes from what we do in our healthcare system. So what I do in my office, the patients I see, and my colleagues, we're only responsible for about 1/5 of our health status. But our health, the ability of our healthcare system to run depends on healthy structural and social determinants of health, and also healthy ecological determinants of health that underlie both these systems. So when the air is polluted, when it's too hot and people are flooding into the ER, when our land is polluted, when our food is polluted, people are unhealthy, and that creates extra strain on the healthcare system and causes it to break down, as we saw during the heat dome, when EMS could not respond to the emergency in time. So that's why it's important for me as a physician to step outside my lane, step outside healthcare, and start speaking to those social, structural, and ecological determinants of health, because that's where I'm going to arguably have the most impact. Another reason why it's really important for health to come to the fore when we start speaking about climate change is because health is a really effective message to get people to support policy proposals. So this is just one study that comes from a lot of different research studies about the messaging that we use to convince people. And it looked at over 7,500 people from 5 different countries around the world. And they actually presented different climate policy proposals and then framed them in terms of different things. So health framing or environment framing, or migration framing or economic framing. And what they found was that health and environmental framing significantly increased the average public person support for these policy proposals. Economic framing actually had no effect, which is interesting because if you think about all the messages we hear in the media over and over again about the economy, and why we can act or why we shouldn't act on the environment, for example. Opportunity framing increased support more than threat framing, so these are all the positive benefits that will come if we put this policy into place. And also, focusing on present impacts was more motivating than focusing on future impacts when it came to policy proposals. And this is what we try to do with CAPE. This is what I try to do with my work with the BC Parks Foundation in nature prescribing. Try to focus on current health impacts, try to focus on the positives, and because these are more motivating to get people to change their behavior. You'll notice the stars on the health framing and opportunity framing. Those are actually the only frames that worked on people who weren't concerned about climate change and didn't care about climate change to get them to support those policy proposals. So this is something that we should all be thinking about when we're speaking to the average person. Talk about health because it matters to everyone. Talk about the opportunity and all the positives that will come from these policy proposals we have because it's more motivating for them to support these policies. So this is where CAPE comes in. So as Don mentioned, I'm president of the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, and our mission is to protect people's health by protecting the planet. And there are so many different ways that we can protect people's health. But I thought today, especially because I knew Adele was going to talk about nature, that I would zero in on the highest impact areas where we can make a difference within Vancouver and within BC. So some of you may know that close to 60% of Vancouver's carbon pollution comes from the natural gas that we use to heat our buildings, which is fracked gas that comes from hydraulic fracturing that comes from the northeast of BC. And close to 40% of our carbon pollution comes from our transportation. And so we can't get to net zero, we can't get to 60% below 2005 levels of carbon pollution by 2030 if we don't tackle buildings and if we don't tackle transportation. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Another reason why it's really important for us to tackle fossil fuels is not only because of how they're heating up our planet, but also how they are polluting our air. So a lot of people don't think about the fact that that fossil fuels generate a lot of air pollution when they're burned, whether it's outside by cars, transportation, or inside by gas stoves. So something else that's true is that people with chronic health conditions, people of color, and lower income communities are disproportionately exposed to air pollution. And this actually has impacts on almost every single health condition that you can think of, from during the prenatal period to children's health to more recently, actually, people who were exposed to higher amounts of air pollution died more from COVID-19. And also, it's been calculated that 1 in 5 deaths worldwide are due to air pollution by burning fossil fuels. And within Canada, the lowest estimate is 14,000 people die per year because of air pollution, and within BC, 2,000 people. And some estimates actually go up to at least 32,000 people per year in Canada dying from air pollution. So when we stop burning fossil fuels in our homes, outside in our vehicles, we are actually going to be saving people's lives, saving people's lungs, hearts, development, directly through reducing air pollution at the same time. So I also want to talk about something that was alluded to before, which is that fossil fuel extraction also harms people at the point of extraction. So we talked about how along the Athabasca River, the Chipewyan Nation is suffering rare cancers. That's happening right here in BC as well. So when you extract natural gas from the ground, it's done through a very highly polluting process called hydraulic fracturing that basically cracks the earth to release natural gas. And by injecting millions of liters of fresh water and a variety of different toxic chemicals into the ground to fracture it. And what this does is exposes people who live in the area to air pollution, to polluted water, and to polluted lands, essentially the farmland where this fracking is happening. And so research has shown that within the US, babies who are born near fracking wells, so within 2 kilometers of fracking wells, have up to 3 times higher the rate of developing childhood acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Research in the US also shows that elders who live downwind of fracking infrastructure, so who breathe in the air pollution from the fracking flares and the volatile organic compounds that are released, have a significantly higher risk of death Within BC and within Alberta, studies have shown that pregnant women who live in proximity to fracking wells have higher amounts of pollutants in their tap water, in their air, and also have more negative prenatal outcomes. So this is not just research that's happening elsewhere in North America or in the world. This is happening right here in our backyard. And we don't even have to, another major thing that we have to think about is Indigenous sovereignty, about the impacts that pipelines being rammed through unceded traditional territories are having on the ability of Indigenous peoples to practice their traditional lifestyle and be healthy. So the next video I want to share is just a video that Cape National actually put together to educate the everyday person about how natural gas is not natural and it's in fact methane, so I'm just going to share it with you.
Here I are on the mean streets asking people about natural gas, methane, nitrogen dioxide, climate change. Who knows what else? Hello, would you rather burn natural gas or methane in your house?
No.
That's an interesting question.
Natural gas?
I think natural gas.
Natural gas?
Natural gas or methane. Isn't methane bad?
I'm gonna say natural gas, it probably smells better.
Like farting? There's already a lot of methane gas in my house.
You have a stove?
Natural gas?
I have no logic behind it, but I'd say natural gas.
Natural gas and methane are the same thing, as it turns out. They're the same thing.
I'm shocked.
That's really good to know.
I am.
Do you know that it's the same thing as methane?
This is not a quiz, but thank you.
And they both release nitrogen dioxide, which increases the risk of childhood asthma and is like basically inhaling secondhand smoke. Burning gas in your kitchen is as bad as smoking in front of your kids. Well, why do you think the fossil fuel industry would want to promote the words natural gas?
Because it sounds better.
Sounds natural, like butter. Because they were natural.
Marketing.
Correct! It's all part of like a kind of propaganda campaign to make methane seem like it's not methane.
Ah, there you go.
What's your first association when you think of the word methane?
Yeah, cow farts.
This is exactly one of the reasons why they changed it. So people associate methane with cow farts and with climate change.
Me too. I'm a person.
It makes it seem like it just kind of wafts out of the ground, and they're kind of trying to promote it as a transition to like a climate-friendly, carbon neutral, and it really isn't. It's just basically burning gas in your house.
No, I'm not considering gas appliances.
The world is changing.
I was asking her, let's go for a gas stove this time. She said, no, I don't feel safe. But I didn't know this reason.
Anyway, enjoy your day.
Okay.
Thank you for educating me. You're welcome. There's a methane to the madness. Don't let them gaslight you. Find out the truth at stopfossilfuelads.ca.
So I think this is a really good example of an interdisciplinary approach to this work, how we can pair with artists and the health sector to get our message across. But also I think something really important that comes out in that video is how much the fossil fuel industry is trying to gaslight us into believing that their products are clean and green and part of a climate safe future, and they are not. Okay, and really quickly I want to touch on the transportation area. So CAPE has put together a couple of reports that specifically have to do with the health effects of transportation. Our traffic-related air pollution report, you can see that one in the middle. Check out our website, it talks about all the different health harms that come from basically car culture. And the one on the left-hand side is actually a specific analysis of cycling within Vancouver and all the health benefits that will come if we embrace active transportation instead of cars. Okay, so now I want to talk about, just quickly, about a few of the ways that Cape BC has collaborated with different organizations to mount successful campaigns. So the first one is one of my favorites, Dr. Lori Adams, and you can see her and her son in the upper left-hand side, basically launched a campaign in conjunction and supported by the BC Teachers Federation to get fossil fuel curriculum, FortisBC's curriculum, out of schools within BC. And this actually made national headlines. It actually prompted the Minister of Education within BC to commit to studying this issue and also increase good, unbiased climate change curriculum within the province. And actually, I think still to this day, FortisBC still has removed their Energy Leaders curriculum that promotes the use of natural gas, actually, from their website. And then we also are not all negative, so we ran a Healthy Climate Solutions Fair last summer that again paired with artists to create kind of beautiful depictions of the healthy future that we can have if we embrace clean energy solutions. And then we do other things. We really focus on anti-fracking and natural gas because again, that has reducing that in environments has a huge potential for impact. So we had a billboard campaign that got a lot of attention, speaker series, and we do writing events with our partners. And so the thought I want to leave you with is, again, climate change is the greatest threat to our health of the 21st century. But if we take action on climate change together, if we come together in interdisciplinary ways and tackle the different ways that we can reduce carbon pollution, like through our diets, like through transportation, like through reducing fossil fuel use, we will see a healthier future where kids like my 8-year-old can thrive. Thank you for listening.
So what does PARX, how do you say that?
Exactly like that.
Oh, PARX, got it. Thank you, Dr. Lem, that was fabulous. Our next speaker is Grand Chief Stewart Phillip. Grand Chief Stewart Phillip has dedicated his life to defending Aboriginal title and rights, achieving reconciliation and self-determination for BC First Nations. A member of the Penticton Indian Band Council for 24 years and Chief for 16 years, he is currently serving his 8th 3-year term as President of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs. It's not a really long introduction, but we want to hear from him, so come on up, Grand Chief.
Thank you. I'm really tired. Had a long day. I drove down from Penticton last night for this event because I know these events, these gatherings, these meetings, the marches we have, the demonstrations are critically important to the future of those people that are most precious to us. I think we have a lot of grandparents in the room. I know that I've been blessed with 15 grandchildren, and that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. A few days ago, I was in Saskatoon, 20 below, and we're out in that weather doing what we do all over this country. And we were challenging RBC. We went to their shareholders meeting and we made some very powerful statements about their propensity to be the bank that invests most heavily in oil and gas. And I've never seen so many 6'3" guys in suits. There was security everywhere. They were in pairs, and the minute you tried to move around, they would stand in front of you, and you weren't able to move around. The first thing they did is divide us, and 2 of us made it into the actual meeting. The other 80-odd people got herded into the basement, into a room without a monitor. It was absolutely, they had snipers on the next building. And of course we took all kinds of videos and pictures and so on and so forth. But the climate crisis and the catastrophic impacts of the intensifying climate crisis is something of concern to every human being on the planet. And again, I absolutely adore my grandchildren, and I want them to have a semblance of what I enjoyed growing up as a young boy and into a young man and finally into a grandfather. The things that I saw and experienced out on the land, the beauty, the pristine beauty The places you could go in British Columbia and take your family and camp out, the clean water is not there anymore. It's devastated. It's devastated by mining, the waste of mining, abandoned tailing ponds. The forests are absolutely gone. And now mills are shutting down and they're sitting around scratching their head wondering, oh, I wonder what happened to the trees. You know, it's insanity how the system works and how it's destroying Mother Earth. And yet we continue to follow that path. And I'm really happy that there's many people here this evening, as there are. It lifts my spirits. And our voice is getting stronger, it's getting louder. We're becoming more and more visible. I remember the march we had, where we had 70,000 people out. I think it was Coretta King that was here. And that was an amazing march to see that mass of humanity standing up for the right values and you know, a simple demand for clean water, clean air, you know, clean soil, as David Suzuki would say, and whatnot. But we cannot depend on governments. You know, they're very, very good at saying the right thing. Some of them are better than others. Some of them are so articulate at saying the right thing, but they turn around and they do precisely the opposite. They continue to pander and kowtow to oil and gas. What I find to be disturbing is all of those good people in our province, in our country, that subscribe to pension plans that support oil and gas. That breaks my heart, because I know they're hardworking teachers, they're hardworking nurses, there are other professional groups, but our organizations have strict protocols that we don't support oil and gas. And I just wish that more of our institutions and our groups would be more socially conscious, more responsible, and realize, you know, what they're doing to not address the climate crisis. But those people that have dedicated their life to this work keep getting out of bed in the morning, and we keep meeting at the same place, and you know, we do our marches, we do our vigils, we have our conferences and so on and so forth, and many of us have become lifelong friends. We started out with dark hair, long hair, and you know, now we're, like, I'm 73 years old now. But I started out as a very, very young man with long hair, a red headband, sunglasses, and you know, I'm still doing it. My wife, Joan, who you'll probably learn more about as time goes on, Joan Phillip, her and I have been together 45 years. And it was her involvement in this type of work that you know, brought me in. Joan went to China in the early 70s and was the spokesperson for a Native People's delegation to the People's Republic of China before it was really open to the West. She went to Chiapas during the Zapatista uprising, and she's been all over the planet defending Mother Earth. And Joan's credo, she always looks at me and she says, we have to do the right thing, which means putting yourself at risk out there with a wall of police and bringing forward your message. So I know you love your grandchildren just as much as I do, and I know you're concerned. Our concerns are intensified during the wildfires and the smoke that comes into the city, the increasing drought, the crop failures that are starting to become more commonplace. All of those things that have an impact on food security, the high fish mortalities that are happening in our rivers because they're so hot now because of the summer heat waves and heat domes. We lost 600 people during that heat dome. I mean, that's unbelievable. And yet we still go to Starbucks. You know, I go to Tim's. You know what, we carry on like, everything is fine. Well, it's not. And we have to speak up. We have to support leaders that are willing to speak up and speak out and stand up. And, I know that I'll go to my grave doing this kind of work. My grandchildren, my children. I had 6 children, 4 boys and 2 girls, both of them teachers. But I lost my son to a carfentanil overdose. My oldest son, 5 years ago. And that's, that opioid crisis within itself, is part of this messed up world. So we're pretty much the hope sitting in this hall here. We've always relied on our elders for their wisdom, for their life experience, to speak up and speak out to when things are going off the rails. And I think the more that we do that, and forget about, partisan politics and, those are just distractions. There is no planet B. This is it. And we have a duty, a sacred duty, and an obligation to leave a legacy for our grandchildren that is a semblance of what we enjoyed as we grew up and traveled around the land with our parents. So I just want to thank you, each and every one of you, for coming out and demonstrating your support by your presence. So it's an honor to be in the presence of such greatness. Why?
Wow, well, thank you so much, Grand Chief, and thank you for making the trip here to grace us with your presence. Our third and final speaker, before we turn it over to the audience, is Adele Liu. Adele is the treasurer of Nature Vancouver, a 105-year-old and fully volunteer-run charitable organization dedicated to promoting the enjoyment and preservation of nature. She joined Nature Vancouver in 2013 as she learned to appreciate the amazing natural environment and wildlife in BC and Canada. She has partnered with environmental scientists and experienced naturalists to bring both science and ordinary citizens' perspectives to the table. Hailing from a country where development was prioritized at any cost, she feels the urgency to get the balance of economic growth and environmental protection right, because she has seen firsthand the impacts of unmitigated encroachment on the natural world. Adele is also one of the many voices opposing the Roberts Bank port expansion. Everybody, please welcome Adele Liu.
Good evening, everyone. It's really a great honor to be here with Melissa and the Grand Chief and all of you. Thank you so much, Don and Jenny, for inviting me. I have to confess, when Don invited me, my initial reaction was actually, oh no, I'm not qualified. By that I meant I'm not an expert in environmental science. I studied finance, not marine biology at university. And after 10 years of bird watching, I have only progressed slightly from an absolute beginner to an advanced beginner. So I felt I just did not know enough. I had not contributed enough to speak here. But I later realized this town hall is about diverse perspectives. So I'm here to share my journey, my passion, and my hopes for our environment. This city, this province, and this country is our home. I live here like all of you. I'm a passionate volunteer like many of you. And I'm an immigrant like most of you, or your parents, or your grandparents. I grew up in the most populous city in China, having very little connections or interactions with nature. But there was the love of nature in me, just like in every human being. And life in Canada ignited that love. I still remember my trip to the Great Bear Rainforest 13 years ago. Seeing a mama grizzly bear and her cub fishing in the river against the backdrop of a pristine rainforest. That was my first time in my life witnessing wildlife up close in their natural habitat, doing their natural things. It was incredibly touching, and I was overcome with joy and awe. We are so fortunate to live here. Our mountains, waters, land are beautiful and supernatural, as we say. I think it's, we must cherish and preserve, just like everyone here has said, we must cherish and preserve what we have. Not being complacent and repeating mistakes other countries made by destroying our ecosystems in the name of economic development. And we need to remember, we are part of the environment. We're not separate from it. So it's a false dichotomy to pit humans against the environment. We all have this innate connection with nature, with animals and plants. And long-term, sustainable human prosperity is simply not achievable by destroying our environment. I think deep down, we all know it. But sometimes we collectively, as a society, we get short-sighted or we get distracted. And sometimes we're deceived by those who would pursue profits and power at any cost. So how do we fight the short-sightedness, distractions, and deceit? My answer is we must learn the knowledge and truth, and we must take actions, and we must not give up. I learned about Roberts Bank port expansion project in the same year I joined Nature Vancouver. As Don mentioned, Nature Vancouver is a fully volunteer-run organization founded in 1918. That's 105 years ago. I think its longevity embodies the rich history and tradition of nature conservation we have in Canada. And it's a wonderful community of nature enthusiasts, conservationists, scientists, and educators. Being part of the community, I've learned so much about nature in the past 10 years. and I've been inspired to join the fight against RBT2 with environmental scientists, indigenous communities, nature advocates, the city of Delta, the city of Richmond, and international communities. The federal government will make its final decision by the end of this month. And the chances are, we fear, they will approve it, despite their own scientists' conclusion that the environmental damages, including including habitat loss and ecological collapse caused by RBT2 will be, and I quote, irreversible and unmitigatable, unquote. Even Global Container Terminals, a private business and one of the largest terminal operators in Canada, is against RBT2. Remember, I studied finance. I also work in finance. I understand economics, and I'm not an absolutist opposing all development projects. But RBT2 is the opposite of everything Canada needs and stands for. And there are economically more viable and environmentally less damaging alternatives. But the Vancouver Port Authority, a federal agency, is hell-bent on spending at least $3.5 billion on an ill-conceived project, totally disregarding the cost and the risk to vital salmon populations, to migratory shorebirds, to the endangered southern resident killer whales, to the already very fragile Fraser estuary ecosystem, to taxpayer money, to the market fairness, and to the job security of its own labor force, and to Canada's international reputation. The fight against RBT2 has been long and frustrating, with the federal government making all the grand statements without taking action. There are days when I'm optimistic and encouraged, like today. I'm convinced that we understand we're in a crisis and it's now or never. But there are also days when I despair, feeling hopeless and helpless. On those dark days, I try to remind myself of the story I read many years ago about a boy saving stranded starfish on a beach. He couldn't save them all, but for each one, he threw back into the ocean. It was the difference between life and death. I remind myself that small actions could have a profound impact. And I remind myself that we can never give up. I dread the terrible decision the federal government is likely to make, but I'm asking you to join me and many others to do everything we can and to save our environment and to stop RBT2. And actually have those posters up on the wall and also on the tables. And you can just use your phone to scan. The first QR code is a petition that's currently at the Parliament and will be closed tomorrow. And the second is a letter launched by Nature Canada to the Prime Minister and his cabinet. Before my time is up, I wanted to share a short video because it tells the story in such a powerful and elegant way. It's a trailer of the documentary, The Soul of the Fraser, and it tells the story of the Fraser River. One of the filmmakers and renowned environmental scientist, Ken Ashley, is also here tonight. Thank you so much, Ken, for creating this film and for sharing it with us. Together, let's learn, act, make a difference, and save our environment. Thank you.
guys heard about the Fraser Estuary?
No.
Have you heard of the Fraser Estuary?
No, I haven't.
No.
No. I have no idea what that is.
If we're talking about the Fraser Estuary, this is Canada's largest salmon producer. It's not producing what it was or did 100 years ago.
Actually getting a little bit run down, actually. Well, you're up against someone who's probably spent $100 million promoting the development, and we have $400 in our bank account.
As the world plans to increase its overall economy, it's determined that we need a much bigger container terminal, and so that's a giant area of the estuary mudflats.
So what these structures do is they really dissect the estuary and that natural mixing of fresh and salt water. We're down to the 20% of remaining habitat in the estuary, and we're going to try to reduce that even more. It's a fool's game, and it's telling people something that actually isn't true.
What is the carrying capacity of this delta to take it in? I've said it 1,000,000 times. This is a depth of 1,000 cuts.
We haven't had any brave leadership yet.
We're hoping today to just talk to people. We're not wanting to vilify these people.
The last place that our family spoke our own language was right here where we are now.
People would pay a lot of money to see the sites that I've seen, and this is only the tip of the iceberg.
My name is Brendan. Nice to meet you, Brendan. I was wondering if I could ask you a question about the environment.
Sure.
Have you heard of the Fraser Estuary?
Thank you very much, Adele. That was beautiful, and thank you for sharing your journey with us today. All right, we're now going to move to the next segment, which is questions and comments from you. And now we have our very able staff and volunteers who are here today with the mic. So if you want to put your hand up, if you want to make a comment or ask a question, we will have the roving mics to come to you. We'll try and alternate between genders for this event, and you will hear the bell. Very able volunteers will also time you. And I'll do my level best to move things along. So we'll start with up here. All right, we'll start with up here.
Hi. I'm Sandra Molina, a dietitian. I started teaching nutrition at UBC 55 years ago. And one of the points Dr. Lem made was about sustainable diets. And I'd really like to emphasize that, because I think the government could be saving a lot of money right now, which it probably needs to do, by stopping subsidizing meat. Meat is a probable carcinogen, beef, and cured meats are convincing carcinogens, and yet we're subsidizing slaughterhouses, beef, and we know that the beef has the carbon dioxide emissions 20 times that of tofu, and all the other legumes are similarly a great positive choice. And I'd like to ask the people here, including in the audience, to start choosing plant-based meals more, and to have at events have plant-based meals. Like when you go to some meeting, make sure they're offering that, make sure that's the one you choose. It makes a huge difference for land acidification, land use. Again, there's like a 20 to 1 ratio. and carbon dioxide emissions, land use, water use, water acidification. And the papers are coming out strongly about this tremendous difference if we switch back to plant-based. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll come to Dr. Lynn for a quick comment.
Sure. Thanks for those comments, and that's certainly something that CAPE supports, is plant-rich diets. So I wouldn't say we go so far as to say plant-based, just because there are a lot of different cultures and practices where animal products are an important part of them, so we don't want to be exclusive of those. But you're right, I mean, what we eat makes up 30% of our carbon pollution globally, and we are way healthier when we eat more plants. And I think actually Canada's food guide, their new food guide that was released within the last, I think it was 5 to 10 years, actually emphasizes plants at the base as opposed to carbohydrates and meat. So they say that to be healthy, you should consume at least half your diet should be fruits and vegetables, 1/4 whole grains and 1/4 protein. So, so just keep that in mind, that that's a healthy plate, both for us and also for our planet when we eat more plants. So thank you for that contribution.
Thank you. All right, and then we're gonna move over here to the red and green, and then we'll go to that side of the room.
I've got a couple of points. One is on the last questioner, my doctor told me to eat more healthily. And I said, well, 2 out of 3 isn't bad. Eat more? Okay. I want to thank the presenters. It's very interesting. But my question is for our MPs. You talked about the funding, large funding that there were for major projects. And one of the things I've found is that if we can do things locally and with the community, it's much less expensive. Is there any funding available for that? For example, once again, onto health, I'm hoping that we can put mobility lanes on the 3 high streets here of Kingsway, Hastings, and Commercial Drive. And that gives people a chance to do active transportation and anybody on personal wheeled vehicles to be able to go along, stop at the shops and services, help them with their economy as long as they help them with their health. So if there is any way that we can work together, get funding going, we've got a big plan already. However you can help would be great. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Maybe I can just quickly jump in with respect to that. The Grand Chief Woodlands Area Council, by the way, are having these active meetings to talk about the Grand Chief Woodlands area in terms of the transportation corridor and working with the city with respect to that. Wally here actually has some really innovative ideas with different ideas on how to sort of get people moving in neighborhoods in a way that is good for the environment and good for the community. And so to that end, I would urge people to connect with the Grand Chief Woodlands Area Council to get more information on that. In terms of specific federal dollars, are there any monies available for programs like this? Not at the moment that I'm aware of. However, a lot of the times these kinds of program funding comes from different levels of government as well, and that's something to also keep an eye on.
Can I just add something really quickly
Yeah.
to that? Something else that we can do to make sure that we get more active transportation in our city is vote for city councilors who actually support them. So we know in the last, I think it was in the last 2 weeks, unfortunately, Vancouver City Council, dominated by councillors who don't necessarily support as climate-friendly policies as others, voted down restoring Broadway with bike lanes. And this is terrible because, as we know from the stats that I presented, close to 40% of our carbon pollution comes from transportation, comes from vehicles. So we should be out in force whenever votes like this happen. Whenever people are talking about active transportation in the city, we need to be voting in climate-friendly councillors, not people who prioritize cars.
Thank you very much. We're gonna go over there, yeah?
Thank you very much for having this meeting. I really appreciate it. I want to really acknowledge the Tsleil-Waututh who have inspired an enormous amount of effort on the part of many, many people in Burnaby to try to stop the Trans Mountain pipeline. I have put in my time doing that to the extent that I've spent 9 days in prison for it. There is I don't think this should be a credit to me. I think this should be a shame to the federal system, which allows a prosecution of citizens who are standing up for something so essential. I'm sure that we all recognize that by this time that the oil companies have been advertising very effectively. You just have to look at your TV set and watch any channel, and you will see beautiful lifestyle, which is combined with petroleum production of all kinds. I don't think it's well known that, for example, the Trans Mountain Pipeline will produce the amount of, oh dear, okay. What I really want to say is, what would help you as MPs from us here on the ground to make it obvious to the Parliament of Canada and the Liberal Party that they stop funding projects like the pipeline and the port off in the Fraser Delta? What would be helpful to you?
More NDP MDs.
Hi, it's Don here. Before I answer the question, I want to say I just saw a clip of our colleague Laurel Collins, who's the NDP federal environment critic, just last week, I think, who was questioning Stephen Gibault, who is the federal environment minister, and the figure she used was that it's now estimated that the Trans Canada pipeline will cost $30 billion. Yeah. So not only is that environmentally insane, but it's economic stupidity. And that's $30 billion that could have gone into any number of the initiatives that you've heard tonight, or many others, that would help in the transition to a clean economy, whether that's public transit or bike lanes or anything else. We got to quit electing people who are supporting things like that. I mean, end of story. You know, in the last election, I think I read that the Liberals had the best environmental plan. And they ran on that. And in fact, some of the MPs, Liberal MPs who were right in the mouth of where the Trans-Canada pipeline is going to be popped out into the Burrard Inlet were re-elected. We got to, I mean, we have to vote accordingly. I don't mean to make this a partisan issue. I'll state for the record here, even my own party provincially is expanding fossil fuel infrastructure, and I think it has to be said that we have to oppose all expansion of all fossil fuel infrastructure wherever it is, no matter who is proposing it. Has to be stopped. And I think it's up to the people to demand that of their politicians. If we want to make progress on climate change, then I'm no scientist, but I think we got to start reducing fossil fuel production and reduce carbon emissions, or else we're not going to hit our targets.
Thank you very much. I see a hand over here, so we're going to go to this corner.
I just have a very succinct question, tagging on to what you just said, Don, as to how provincial, federal, and municipal governments can work together. I would have loved to have seen, for example, city politicians here tonight as well as MLAs, so just wondering how, I just think it's so critical that we figure out how to work together.
To get all levels of government working together, I don't think is an impossible task, but there has to be the political will to make it happen. I think as Dr. Lim had indicated, for example, if you look at City Hall at the moment, what's happening there, it is a slow erosion of what was accomplished previously. But there are areas where I hope that we can find collaboration in. The issue around expansion, leave it in the ground, I like to say leave it in the ground as a simpler way of saying it. Stopping Kinder Morgan expansion as an example would be another piece where I have gone to many, many rallies before where I see electeds from different levels of government joining together. And I think it's really coalescing that power together. And then I come from the grassroots, so I have to say, it's also the voices of the people where it needs to be heard. And for the electeds to really follow the people and not the other way around. That's where I think changes is going to happen at all levels of government. Okay, so we're going to segue back to this side of the room, and then we're going to come to those two over there. So we have this here, and then there's a hand at the back.
I know.
Good evening. My name is John Miller. I was the BC's provincial health officer, the first provincial health officer 30 years ago. I just want to tie together Dr. Lim and Grand Chief Phillip's comments a little bit here. Dr. Lim played one of my favorite songs here, The Determinants of Health. It's 80% is not the care system. And you mentioned quite a few of them, the air pollution, but the other ones, as you well know, just to augment what you said, it's poverty and unemployment and homelessness and this incredible concentration of wealth and the inequity we have. And this inequity that we have is causing, as I'm sure you know, the diseases of despair amongst those of the overdose deaths, suicides and alcoholism. And also, it's tied to what's now being called aggrieved entitlement, which is leading to this unbelievable phenomenon of mass murders that we're seeing here in Canada now, like in the US. And there are remedies to this that are in preparation. You talked about the just transition. Well, if the just transition when it comes out of the Liberal thing, it better have a job guarantee with a living wage, pensions, possibly even co-ownership, certainly training, and there must be jobs. And if we can do that, that'll go a long way to solving poverty and homelessness and so forth. But the other thing for reducing this extreme concentration of wealth, we need to tax the rich and the wealthy and redistribute it and use the money for our green economy and for education and healthcare and so forth. So you politicians that are here, would you support those policies? They sound like good NDP policies to me.
Can I just say, I think I can answer really succinctly that I've come to fully intuitively believe that social justice, economic justice, and environmental justice are all mutually required, and you can't have one without the other. All three of them must be. They must all be, I guess, accomplished, or else any one of them will not actually happen. There must be no.
Thank you very much, Dr. Miller. I think the short answer is yes. All right, we're going to go to the back. I think there was a hand back there somewhere. If you can put your hand back up so our roving mic can come to you.
This is a general question. I'll take my glasses off so I can see. It gets that stage in life where you have glasses for two things. So forgive me for the controversial aspect of this. I'm not sure how it's going to be taken, but so Don, I voted for you for the 20 years I've lived in my ride, and we've spoken together. I'm a small C conservative, and I'm saying that just because I actually don't have political affiliations, but I want to ask this question of all of the politicians. Why is it that the leader of the NDP is allowed to be in bed with the Liberals and then you bitchy complain about the Liberal Party? They're a minority. If Jagmeet Singh would say no, you no longer get to be Prime Minister, I'm going to maybe visit some other party and say, look, if this Roberts Bank thing upset me now, because I've been following it just mildly. And now when I'm going to do my due diligence and do some deep dive, but why is it that it's okay to, look, I'm not a fan of the Liberal Party right now, what they're doing and the bills they're coming up with and the poor hunters with their guns and everything. The bottom line is, why are you supporting them? Like, that, I just have a question about that. They're a minority, you're a minority, but where you lost it for me as a person that saw a country of workers approach Ottawa, that no one came out and said, hey dude, you know what, the NDP guy comes out, I'm going to speak with you workers, what's the issue here? He would have been the leader of the bloody country in 2 seconds if Jagmeet had done that. If he had gone out and spoken with the people that came out and said, you know what, we just need to be heard a little bit. I'm upset about that. That's all, the bell's gone, so I have to give this back. But you have to answer that question, please. Why are you not saying enough now? This guy doesn't
I'm
have
happy
the
to
best
answer the question on our behalf. Thank you for that. I will tell you this. We have 25 New Democrats in the House of Commons. And what are we doing every day? We are fighting for the people. I talk to seniors who actually tell me that they cannot eat the food because they don't have dental care. They don't have access to see a dentist. They have to blend up their food to drink it. That is what's happening in our communities today, in my own community and across the country. So what have we done to do what we can to use the power of 25 elected members of parliament out of 338 to leverage as much as we can get for the people? Is it everything we want? No. I complain bitterly about the Liberals each and every day. I'm the housing critic. I'm the immigration critic. I can go on for days about how angry I am about a whole variety of things. But that said, I'm also there to try and get something done. And that's what we're trying to do, to deliver some things for some people, not all of it. And yes, when the election comes, you better believe we're going to fight like heck to get rid of this government and to elect an NDP government. We're going to do that every single day. So I won't go on about all the things that we try to get, but it's just an example of some of the things that we're trying to do and the reason why we're doing this work. I'm going to come back to this side of the room, and the individual in the glasses, and then the lady in the also glasses, the two individuals over there. We're going to go two here, and then we're going to come back to this room here, this side of the room here, here, and then there.
They've seen it.
I have a very despairing question. Sorry, everybody. And there's been a few answers by the members of this group. But my question is how likely is it that the oil and gas industry can be moved to change? What can we do as Canadians? What actions can we take, and what do you foresee in the future?
Maybe I can invite one of our panelists to answer that question.
Can you repeat the question?
The question was, what can we do to move the oil and gas sector to do the right thing? I think that's a short summary.
Not to move them to do the right thing. What can we do to force them?
Okay, what can we do to force the oil and gas sector to do the right thing?
What to move them forward?
Or electric cars.
No? No takers from the panelists?
I will take a stab at this. So industry responds to what people spend on. They respond to the dollars that we spend, so we can vote with our dollars. We can buy electric vehicles if we want to. I mean, there are a whole bunch of issues with replacing gas-powered cars with electric vehicles. But anyway, stop buying, if you can, combustion fuel vehicles. Get your home off gas. Show the industry that there's no future in it. So these are things that we can do on individual levels, like choose plant-rich diets that aren't fossil fuel intensive to raise. There's so many things we can do as individuals to decarbonize our own lifestyles. But at the same time, it's so important for us, again, to vote for parties, politicians, people who prioritize these issues, because they're the ones in power who can then put measures in place to make it very unfriendly for the industry to continue pillaging the earth and polluting our air and polluting our land and waters. So, I mean, that's my simple take on it, but I will mention, actually, that CAPE has an active fossil fuel ad ban campaign that focuses on greenwashing that the fossil fuel industry is doing to try to convince consumers that it's not so bad to continue to burn fossil fuels, to continue to invest in them. And it zeroes in on all the claims of the gas industry that their products are clean and affordable and also healthy for us. So that's something else that you can do, is donate to organizations like CAPE, like indigenous organizations that are trying to end fossil fuel expansion through their territories. There's so many ways that you can vote with your dollar, either personally or donating, to make sure that healthy policies are put in place.
I'm gonna go to the Grand Chief.
Okay, thank you. I'm an alcoholic, and I've been clean and sober now for about 36 years. The reason I bring that up is when you start your journey to sobriety, you have to admit your life has become completely unmanageable. And I think with this issue, it's no different. We have to arrive at that conclusion that, quite frankly, we're going to hell in a handbasket. And, what we've witnessed to date is nothing compared to what's coming at us. And we still haven't accepted that. We still continue to live our lives like this wasn't hanging over us, but more importantly, our grandchildren and their grandchildren. So I think it starts there. And we have to, for example, the permafrost in the north is melting at an unbelievable rate. It's going to completely compromise all of the infrastructure up in the Northwest Territories, pipelines, highways, roads, power lines. But more worrisome is the fact that there are trillions of microorganisms and viruses that are being released into the atmosphere that have been frozen for millions of years. And I believe that the pandemic that we struggled through is nothing compared to what's going to happen in that regard. And that's just an example of the rising sea levels. It's happening as we sleep, and we think, oh, well, it'll never happen. But it is going to happen. And everything like that. When we really understand what's going on is when we're in the middle of a massive flood where all our roads and infrastructure wash out because it's not built to the standards to withstand atmospheric river flooding. That's the reality. I hope to heavens that the roads they've repaired, they've upped the standards and not simply built it according to the previous standards, or it's simply going to wash out again. So that's what we need to do and understand. Secondly, we need to understand it's our responsibility, not Mr. Davies or Jenny. It's each individual one of us has a responsibility to say something, to do something. Doesn't matter how small it may seem. Volunteer, carry a placard, show up. A big part of this is showing up when there's rallies and demonstrations. We have to demonstrate, and we have to be specific when we're out there. We can't talk about, big banks. We've got to name them. We've got to name all 5 of them and whatnot, because that's what they do not like, is to be singled out. That's harmful to them. We need to do things like that and be relentless. and the voice has to grow louder. Look at what's going on in Iran. And look that from that one woman, we have a global movement. It's one of the most powerful political movements on the planet. And we have to know and understand that, Mother Earth is worth fighting for. And to do it, quite often, we'll go to a rally and go home and feel, really good about ourselves, but, that's unfortunately not enough. I really hate to say this, but I'm not convinced the confidence and supply agreement between the NDP and the Liberals was such a great idea. Because what it did was silence those 25 voices that Jenny was just talking about. Because the terms of that agreement is right across the boat. And I think we came out on the short end of that stick because we don't have a voice that's, raising the roof on the climate crisis. So, but there's so much power in this room. We were all young once, we all had long hair and we had tie-dye t-shirts and, we were rockers. We still got that in us that we can get out there and kick some butt. So we don't have a lot of time, all of us. A lot of us, like myself, are, carry different illnesses and things like that. So what little time we have left, we got to get out there and kick ass and support leaders that are willing to do that, stand up and take the risks and so on and so forth. But it's not a lost cause. I refuse to accept that fact. It's there's so much wisdom in this room. There's so much experience, and we just need to organize that and. This has been going on too long. I can't stand that syrupy liberal voice. Smarmy voice.
Thank you, Grand Chief. Okay, so I am noting the time is 8:44. We have a number of speakers who still wanted to speak. What I'm going to suggest, if we can actually, I'm going to go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more people at 30 seconds each, if I could. Okay, so we can sort of try and move through and get as many speakers up, and then maybe we will do the response at the end as a group. Okay, so the individual over there, yeah.
I had my hand up before the
I have news for everyone. Science has already figured out how to stop global warming, and it's through a new invention. And there is no money to develop new inventions. That's the end of the story. If you don't provide money for people to make their inventions happen, nothing will get done.
Thank you. All right, we're going to come to this side of the room, the individual over here in the red.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about water storage and the ability of all of us actually to do more to be stewards of our planet. As such, Grand Chief says, what we can do collectively is far more important than necessarily what our politicians can do. For people, if we store water for the summer, we can water all summer long rather than listen to these watering restrictions. Our watering restrictions are not helping the people further up in the country get their water because our water lands on the coast, it evaporates, it goes through a cycle of showers. And the only way to get more water on the land is to get more water on the land.
Thank you. When we come over here, yes?
I had my hand up at the very beginning.
Well, there were many hands up, so go ahead.
Hello. I have been a protector of the planet since I was a teenager. I'm 86 now, so I've been at this for a long time. First of all, I want to make a comment on the carbon focus. We have a lot of pollutants, a lot of things that are killing the planet, other than carbon. Carbon happens to be the one element at the center of life as well. Now, quite frankly, we don't have any natural weather anymore. After World War II, the United States Army or military started something called owning the weather project, owning the weather 2020. We do not have any natural weather anymore. I challenge anyone to go to geoengineeringwatch.org and you will find exactly what the technology is that's causing all of this weird climate. It isn't that climate is changing, climate is being changed, and it's being changed on a military basis.
All right, and I think there was a hand back there. We can go to that.
Just to add to that, we need to get our heads out of the sand. This is the elephant in the room. There's no point talking about climate change if you don't understand that the documentation has been there for decades. Military whistleblowers, scientific whistleblowers, pilot whistleblowers. Geoengineering is happening. Go to geoengineering, every single last person in here. Go, and every single person of the panel, please write it down and watch the documentary, The Dimming. Learn about global dimming and how it's been induced by the very things this woman introduced up here. We've got our heads in the sand, and stop thinking you're going to hear about it on CBC. The media is controlled. And the fact chokers at Google control things too. Globalengineering.org. It is essential. And watch The Dimming.
Geoengineering Watch.
All right, we're going to close with the last individual with a hand up, and then we're going to come to the panel for a quick response, and then we're going to wrap it up.
I just wanted to know why you think natural gas is a problem. All over the place they flare off natural gas. So why would you want to get your heating off of natural gas? That's my question.
Okay, thank you. All right, that brings us right back to the panel up here for a quick sort of response to that cluster of comments and questions. Yeah, just a quick sort of.
I think it's great everyone is so passionate, and we all have, I think even within the same spectrum that we are all very pro-environment, we want to save our environment. I think everyone, we have some diverse perspectives here. One thing I do want to mention, I've learned a lot from the panelists and from the audience here. One thing I think we all need to keep in mind is a lot of things are determined on a supply and demand basis. If we cannot just, yes, we need to look at the supply side, how we can greenize our energy production. But on the demand side, if we just keep increasing our energy consumption, we cannot tell the oil and gas companies that we don't need your product while their product is selling with a big profit. That's not gonna happen. So we need to be realistic. Think about both supply and demand is us.
Thank you, Adele. All right, Grand Chief, closing comments?
Well, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out. It's been an interesting dialogue we've had here tonight, and I'm sure that we'll see each other in the future from time to time. I'm hoping so. In terms of natural gas, I've always been led to believe there is no such thing as natural gas. There's only frack gas. And I've seen firsthand the impacts of fracking.
Absolutely.
We flew over in choppers at nighttime, and you can see all the fracking sites because, as the gentleman said, they burn off the gas. And it looks like Burnaby, it looks like Vancouver from the air, and it's publicly available. And, they sit in settling ponds and represent, an imminent threat because they're going to go somewhere. So I never did believe this notion of natural gas. And the short video clip we saw, pretty much when I, committed myself to this movement, those were the good old days when it was the tar sands. Instead of this silly notion of the oil sands. So it's tar sands, and it's fracked gas, and it's not good for us. It's not good for the environment, and that's why we're all in this room. Thank you.
I'll just like to
Dr.
say, on behalf of the whole audience, Dr. Lam did not mention that they have poisoned and destroyed the earth. They have destroyed the lung of the earth. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to go to Dr. Lim to close.
Thank you. And to add more about the question of natural gas and our use of fossil fuels in general, I want us to think about not only the impact of burning the gas at source, but the impact of the entire life cycle of natural gas from the fracking fields in Northeast BC that some studies show increased rates of prenatal issues. I want people to think about issues with Indigenous sovereignty when that gas is piped down the line to ships on the shore. I want people to think about the air pollution in our homes that happens when we burn gas in our stoves. And I want people to think about how much of our carbon pollution comes from gas that we use in our buildings. So when we turn up our thermostats or when we turn on our stoves, just think about the impacts you're having on health and on BC and Canada and the world in general. And then last but not least, I just want to leave you to think about what I ended my presentation with, which is the idea that there are so many co-benefits that we can see to our health, to our economy, to ourselves when we embrace climate-friendly policies. Active transportation means less air pollution, more exercise, healthier people, more green space in our cities, lower urban heat island effect, direct positive impacts on people's mental health, and also sequestration of carbon pollution. Every time we do something climate friendly, we're also improving our health at the same time. And I want people to think about that when you think about your grandkids, when you think about your kids, when you think about yourselves and what's important to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. I want to say thank you to all of you for taking time to join us in this town hall today. A special thanks to, of course, all the panelists for their perspective, their journey, their information, and their heart, really, because that's what brought us to this room, their heart and the belief that better is possible, that we have to drive change. So with that, my friends, the evening's coming to an end. I want to take a moment also to thank all the volunteers and the staff from both Don's office and my office as well, and the people happening tonight. Last but not least, we like to end the evening in a good way and to follow protocol a little bit and to give our guests just a small little token of a gift that I'm just noticing the price tag. So I'm going to discreetly so that does not create a further awkward moment for all of us. Here we go. All right, excellent, thank you. All right, so we're gonna just present a blanket to our panelists and to thank them for sharing their knowledge with us.